Welcome back to the NFL Rundown from talkSPORT Endzone, your official dedicated NFL YouTube channel from talkSPORT. And, well, right now, I mean, we're recording. I'm going to have to give you an exact time because so many deals have been flying in over the last 2 days. It's 2:35 on Tuesday afternoon.
Wait, breaking news. Go ESPN
on.
alert. Aaron Rodgers has signed with...
Don't even.
I'm just joking. He hasn't decided yet.
Genuinely has been breaking news.
Or this is going to end up on YouTube, and he will have decided in the hour before it posts or something, yeah.
This is the problem, is that you joked, and then I clicked on my Twitter feed, and immediately Mike Garafolo tweeting that CJ Gardner-Johnson is leaving the Eagles, going to the Texans in exchange for Kenyon Green going in the other direction.
Wait, a live breaking news trade on our show live in the United Kingdom. I love it.
So that means that the Texans have traded away 2 offensive linemen already this offseason when they desperately need more offensive linemen.
That means that DeMeco Ryans literally hated his offensive line last year.
Well, maybe it might have been something to do with the coordinator. We're going to get into all of that. Right, on the show today, we're going to break down the biggest moves from the first 2 days of, not even free agency officially, the tampering period, to the extent where actually I spoke with one of the teams today about media availability and getting players on to do interviews, etc. And in one of the responses they went, of course, none of these deals are official at the moment. They are merely reports. And I was like, yeah. It's all a nonsense and a rigmarole. By the time we got to the start of free agency,
there'll be no one left to sign.
So many deals were already done on Sunday.
My gosh.
Monday when the tampering period opening, so many deals done then. They were flying in left, right and centre. So we are going to get into the big money signings, people staying where they maybe look like they weren't going to stay. In Myles Garrett's case, Josh Allen getting big money. We'll do our big winners and losers of the early stages of free agency. But we need to start off with, as we have done the last 2 shows, the quarterback carousel, because Aaron Rodgers still without a team. But Geno Smith, he's out of Seattle. He's now in Las Vegas.
Let me see if I can keep up with this, because I have it all in my head. I've had to write all these stories, but they have pinballed so much to some unexpected destinations. Let me see if I have this all set up. All right, go ahead.
Seattle get a 3rd-round pick back. Geno gets a much bigger deal than Seattle were willing to offer, approximately $45 million average per year. The contract offer they were going to give Geno Smith has been accepted by Sam Darnold, who lands himself in Seattle. Seattle also moving a bunch of other players out. We'll talk all about the Seahawks coming up. Meanwhile, Justin Fields goes to the Jets, 2-year deal, $30 million guaranteed, $40 million overall. Looks kind of like it might just be a 1-year deal, similar to when Derek Carr returned back with the Raiders. And right now, we still don't know what the Steelers are doing, with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson being probably their 2 most likely landing spots. And increasingly, we're looking like the Tennessee Titans are going to take Cam Ward, and there's going to be a bum fight behind them for who gets Shedeur Sanders. So where do you want to start with that, Brian? Like, with all of those moves, take something from that you like and you want to talk about.
I want to start with Myles Garrett. That's where I've been waiting all week to get into. I would say go off, but I don't want to give away the show. I've been waiting all week to get into the Myles Garrett. We will hold that.
Take a breath. We'll get there.
I think I know what you want to get into, and it's fun. And it started all this. Geno Smith, right? Like, did somebody really pursue that's my opinion. Like, Geno Smith to me is okay. He's a starter. You're not winning the Super Bowl with Geno Smith. The fact that he has changed teams, that he was pursued, but that the team that let him go probably needed him more. I just don't understand the Geno Smith move. I don't understand the Geno Smith move for the Raiders unless they plan to draft a quarterback, because Geno Smith is he's not your future, Will. Like, we can 100% disagree on this. I don't care. I know that I'm right on this. Geno Smith is not going to take the Raiders to the top of the AFC West next year.
Geno Smith is essentially a high-end bridge quarterback.
He's a bridge quarterback.
But what I would argue is that, and our friends Greg Rosenthal and their team around the NFL used to do this thing called the Dalton scale, which was, if you have a quarterback who is Andy Dalton or better, then you have a chance to compete. This was when he was on the Bengals.
When he was good, Andy Dalton.
If you have somebody who is below him on the scale, then you need to find yourself a quarterback. And I would argue that scale right now sits around Geno Smith. I would argue differently.
This is why we have the show, and this is where we have fun.
His performances of the last 3 years in Seattle, and I say this begrudgingly, historically have been that of a top 12 to 15 NFL quarterback. And doing it whilst under consistent duress in a system which wasn't very good, with an offensive line that was absolutely dreadful, with underperforming receivers outside. DK Metcalf had one of his worst seasons last year.
He still had DK Metcalf, who was good enough for another team to go out and give him major money and trade for him. I completely, in a fun way, disagree with you. Geno Smith is he's Geno Smith. He's average. He's meh. He doesn't move the meter. Why did you have to go out and get Geno Smith? But the flip side of it, and this is where it's fun, this is the dominoes, is that Seattle should have kept him.
I'm telling you
that's
now,
what really blows my mind, is that Seattle's going to do this with Sam Darnold, and what does that really get you? I don't understand any of this, Will.
After Stafford decided to stay at the Rams, of all these other quarterbacks we're talking about, if you are a team who wants to win now, I'd say arguably the only team really on this list of teams we're talking about, Seattle, a 10-win team last season who missed out on the playoffs thanks to a strength of schedule nonsense, and maybe Pittsburgh, right? Of those two teams, those should have been the two teams where Geno Smith landed. Because of these quarterbacks, of Rodgers, of Darnold, of everyone here, I think Geno gives you the best chance to win now.
Geno's better than Sam Darnold?
Right. So this is where we need to get into it. This is fun.
This is what we do here.
Sam Darnold played better than Geno Smith last year. Right? I don't think anyone has any bones about that, right? But he was in Minnesota with a fantastic scheme,
fair point,
with a good offensive line, with maybe the best 1-2 punch at receiver in the NFL,
fair point,
plus a good running back, a good tight end. Like, everything was set up for him to succeed. What you have is him moving to Seattle, where with Geno Smith, they had a guy who consistently bailed them out over the last 2 years, who had a time to throw of well below 2.5 seconds, whereas Sam Darnold is one of the longest in the NFL, closer to 3.5 seconds, and that's a real worry. They have an offensive line which doesn't do the business, and they've got rid of two players in Tyler Lockett, who, okay, he's probably at a point where he might be retiring, but
still good.
Experienced possession receiver.
A number 2, number 3 receiver in the NFL.
And they're great outside guy. Now, Jackson Smith and Jigba emerged last year, became their number 1 guy, and I'm a big fan of his, but they've essentially, if anyone tries to argue with me that Seattle are in any way a stronger team now than they were 3 days ago, I think they need to have their head examined, because Sam Darnold is so not a fit with what their current staffing is.
And is due to return to planet Earth pretty soon. And he did at the end of last season.
And here's the thing, right? The argument in the heads of the people involved, and I really think John Schneider brought in Geno Smith at a time where he brought him in to have, a quarterback battle where he thought it was going to be a bridge thing, where he thought he was going to last a year, and he outplayed what everyone expected him to. And maybe Geno Smith should have looked at the $30 million a year which they've offered. Well, it's about 36 they've given Darnold. It's basically the Baker Mayfield deal with the percentage of the new cap added on top of it, right? So maybe you should have looked at that deal and gone, do you know what, actually, this situation's been really great for me, but if he can get $10 million more a year and go and play for the Raiders after the career he's had, I've got no problem with that at 34 years old. He solved so many of their problems last year, which Sam Darnold doesn't. But I think they brought Clint Kubiak in and they've gone, right, we want to run the ball a load more. We want to run a load of play action. And Sam Darnold is better suited, in theory, to that system. The problem is that to run play action, they want to run under centre, and they don't think Geno Smith can run under centre. If Sam Darnold, the moment he turns his back to that defense to hand the ball off, whether it's play action, whether it's a run from under centre, every time with the middle of their offensive line right now, he is going to get hit time. He might get sacked an average of 5 times a game next season if they don't.
And he's not a mobile quarterback. You know, I mean, he's
With all of these things, you have to take a bit of a long-term view, and maybe they spend 9 draft picks and they're all on interior offensive linemen and 3 of them land. But when you consider what the Bears have done in the last 2 weeks, and we'll get on to them, If the Seattle had done that and then paired this move, I'd understand it. But Sam Darnold going into that offense as it was last season, I think is going to be a disaster, and is going to make everyone look bad in this situation. It's going to cost John Schneider his job.
I like Geno Smith reuniting with Pete Carroll, right? Like that's a really cool story. Is it going to work in Las Vegas? I don't know. You mentioned last week on the show, Las Vegas has talent. They re-up Max Crosby. They should have been better than they were. They have some talent. You have Tom Brady. This is just a start. You're going to have, everyone forgets, Will, it's free agency and the draft, right? It's not just free agency. It's free agency and the draft, because when you're building this teams, you have this huge board and you're piecing it all together, and it starts in free agency. I've always been of the opinion, and a lot of general managers think the same thing, they should flip-flop it. You really should have the draft and then free agency, but they'll never do that because the NFLPA and the players want to get paid up front and get this done. I like Geno Smith going back with Pete Carroll in Vegas. Justin Fields to the Jets, like, I can't really figure that one out either. What do they really think that they're getting? And is Justin Fields going to take you from 5 wins to 10 wins? I don't think he can do that. It was a free agency quarterback soup of meh, and all they really did was just spin the carousel around. The best one for me is Aaron Rodgers, if he is still has some version. Aaron Rodgers is like Darth Vader, right? Like, is there anything left in Darth Vader that's still Anakin Skywalker? Is there anything left of old Aaron Rodgers left in current Aaron Rodgers? I don't know. Someone's going to pay way too much money to find out, but I just feel like everyone just moved the carousel around, and they're all in different places, and nobody's going to be that good next year.
I think the Jets are accepting that with Aaron Glenn and coming off the back of the Aaron Rodgers era, that they are in a rebuild, and that Justin Fields, for what he's been paid, which, as I said, $40 million, $30 million guaranteed.
It's a smart contract.
It's practically high-end backup money. Yeah. It's nowhere near that kind of what we consider a lower-tier backup, the Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold type money. So essentially, they stay reasonably cheap at the position. They give themselves a chance to maybe draft someone, whether that's moving up, whether that's waiting for the 2nd or 3rd round and getting a Dart, or Jalen Milroe, someone like that, and seeing how they work. And Justin Fields has had flashes, and he's a good running quarterback, and he's had flashes. He was
solid at the start with Pittsburgh last year before he lost his job to Russell Wilson. And I remember all Steelers fans were freaking out because they were winning with Justin Fields. They didn't want to screw it up.
And listen, Pittsburgh wanted Justin Fields back. They actually looked at the move they made last year, which at the time got lauded because Russell Wilson won his first 2 or 3 starts. Ignoring the fact he went 0-5 to end the season and they collapsed entirely, they wanted Justin Fields back. They saw him as the cheaper, better option whilst they tried to figure out what they were going to do long-term at the position. And instead, they're probably going to end up with Russell Wilson, but maybe Aaron Rodgers. Now, DK Metcalf, I think is not in the same way George Pickens is an off-the-field issue necessarily.
But he is a bit of an issue. I have no problem saying, like, I'm not going to get in trouble saying that. DK Metcalf is a bit of an issue, and it's okay to say that. It's 2025. We don't have to, be on eggshells and not worry about offending anyone. This isn't the woke era anymore. We all know that. DK Metcalf is a bit of an issue at times. I love that DK Metcalf signed with the Steelers, or goes to the Steelers, and he doesn't know who his quarterback's going to be. That's very DK Metcalf to me.
We might end up catching passes from Russell Wilson again, which, in a way,
wouldn't that be amazing?
I think what DK Metcalf tells us, because they've given him the big contract, right? I think it tells us the Steelers are going to move on from Pickens. I don't know if that's this offseason or they try and play them together this year, but he's only got a year left on the deal. Really good time to trade someone
like George Pickens, and I would love to be right on this, but really good time to trade is during the draft. A lot of those guys, the guys that have multiple issues, the guys who you want to move, but the time to move that is because you're going to get a 5th round pick, a 3rd round pick, and you just accept it and you move on. I would not be surprised if George Pickens gets moved during the NFL draft.
But if Pickens and Metcalf take to the field together next year,
interesting.
The skill sets are incredibly similar. They're both outside guys. They're both bump and run guys. They both got big hands. So you surely have to go with Russell Wilson because at least he can throw a decent deep ball. Those two with Aaron Rodgers, where Aaron Rodgers is a nightmare off the field and George Pickens is a nightmare off the field, and DK Metcalf gives up more penalties.
That is and I know they did Hard Knocks not longer. That is Hard Knocks' dream. That has to be.
What's Mike Tomlin doing? Is he trying to give himself
Is he trying to get himself fired? Is that what you're saying?
I feel.
Could you imagine dealing with Aaron? This is so amazing. I want Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens all in the same offense, in the same locker room. That team, they will be having fights. They will also go on retreats together. They will be reality TV 2025, and they're going to win 8 games.
Wild. Absolutely wild. I think that kind of covers the quarterback side of it, and a little bit about DK to Pittsburgh as well. We'll go through our biggest winners and losers because there's so many stories to cover and so many teams to get into. And we've kind of talked the Seahawks already. I want to talk Niners. I want to talk Pats. I want to talk the Bears and Rams are a couple of ones I've got on my list. Certainly, I want to get your idea on what on earth the Texans are doing.
Myles Garrett.
But let's talk Myles Garrett. Let's
can we do that now?
Let's do that right now.
I love we're just winging it because there's so much going on. You can't cover everything. You literally have to go back and you're seeing 1,000 stories. Oh man, the NFL. The fact that the NFL can go, Will, from the Super Bowl to the Combine to free agency. Every once in a while, I hear from somebody like, "What happens when the NFL stops? Like, what do you?" I've heard this my whole life. What do you do? And I'm like, and it's a very nice question, and they're just curious, so I accept that. But somewhere in my head, I'm like, are you bleeping kidding? The NFL is bigger the second they stop playing games.
There's literally about 9 days from after the Super Bowl call-off, around Tuesday, Wednesday, when everyone's kind of sick about talking about who won the Super Bowl, till the Combine starts, where it feels dead. And then you get to the Combine and all the GMs and coaches start talking and suddenly, bang, we're going again. Here we go, off to the races.
The second free agency ends, it's going to be a month build-up. The biggest part of the year, other than the actual season for me, is always that month build-up because free agency will end, and about April 1st, Fool's Day, it's the build-up to the draft. And it is just draft. And you have that, and then you bring the whole band back together because you have the rookie mini camps and the workouts and then OTAs, and then they go away and they get arrested and you have some off the field issues because they're not playing, and then you're into training camp. Then it's a build up to training camp, and you have holdouts. The fact that the NFL is able to take a 17-game season and to turn it into a year-round circus that we have to pay attention to, I always will say that is the NFL's greatest trick, that the NFL only plays 17 games a year. And we care about it more in the offseason than the regular season. It's so fun. It's so addicting. And then you have Myles Garrett happen.
We are very much in lying season right now, right? And DK Metcalf, the one thing I didn't mention with him is that the reason I feel bad about that move, not only because he's so similar to George Pickens and I think had a down year last year, but regardless of anything else, he said he wanted to go somewhere warm and to a contender, and he's gone to somewhere cold and somewhere that's lost their last, 9 playoff games in a row, right? Myles Garrett tells the world on the Tuesday of Super Bowl week, I want out. I don't want to be in Cleveland anymore. They've absolutely shot themselves in the foot.
Correct me, because we've had a lot going on. Wasn't that was that Super Bowl Media Day?
It might have been the Monday.
The day. Yeah. It was basically like the NFL had shown up in New Orleans. The show was beginning, and Myles Garrett tried to. Sorry to interrupt you, but tried to take over the Super Bowl with his trade demand. Let's truly set the stage.
And he says, "I want to go somewhere. I'm 29 years old. I know I'm probably going to Canton if I retire today based on the first 8 years of my career. I want to go somewhere and win a ring and ensure that's actually going to happen. I want to go to a contender. I'll even take less money to do it. I just want to be somewhere where I can actually go and win games."
And he had a statement with his logo, and it was signed,
He came to Radio Row. He went on with Mina Kimes.
He did all the hits.
Went on with Pro Football Talk. He did all of the...
It was all completely orchestrated.
Yeah. And yet, the day before free agency is due to open, Myles Garrett, with a $204 million 4-year extension, $123 million in guaranteed money, $40 million average per year, and a no-trade clause which lasts until he's 36 years old, Myles Garrett is staying in Cleveland, where they now have the pieces to a decent defense and still absolutely no clue what they're going to do at the quarterback position beyond bringing in Kenny Pickett, who...
Kenny Pickett.
I mean, maybe they told Myles Garrett, "Why don't you stay in Cleveland? We're going to bring a.
By the way,
we're going to bring a Super Bowl winning quarterback into Cleveland this week."
Kenny Pickett, small Kenny have to wear gloves. Pickett.
Yeah. So look, it's clear when everyone looks at this, they see that Max Crosby got his big money earlier in the offseason, $106.5 million, $35.5 million a year, became the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. By the way, how badly does this kill the Bengals, who said they're going to make Jamar Chase the biggest non-quarterback of all time, and the Browns are going, we'll screw you over. He leapfrogs him by nearly $5 million per year, and then comes out and says, "No, I think we can win a ring here." Wild. Just...
I will,
at least it's the team nearest Canton. If that's where he wants to end up.
I will go ahead and give you my biggest loser of free agency right now, and that is Myles Garrett. I hate the term sold out.
Can anyone who's just earned themselves $200 million be considered a loser?
Biggest loser of free agency by far, not even close. Light years beyond. Myles Garrett. And I hate to, sellout was a big term when I was in the alternative music, as we called it, the 90s, right? You were super cool and authentic, and then you did something and you signed with a major label. Okay. He got his money. He's richer than we will ever be, obviously. He completely sold out. That's just a start. He looks like an absolute fool. The professional integrity looks like a joke. To release that statement, but of all teams, Will, if you did this with the Rams, you did this with the Colts, you did this with the Texans, you could go on the list. The Jaguars, I'd rather have him done this with the Jaguars, because then he could have said, well, we're trying to build something here, and I believe in Trevor Lawrence. We just hired Liam Cohen. You are going back to the same situation, the worst run franchise in many ways in the NFL in the last 20 years, an owner that you appear to hate, who wouldn't even meet with you. You had the Deshaun Watson situation. We could have said before that the worst move in Cleveland Browns history was Deshaun Watson. Right now, it looks like Myles Garrett's current situation, because he said he never wants to play for you again. And then the only reason he came back was because you gave him a ton of money, and he's not going to win there. He doesn't have a quarterback. It's so bad. It's so bad. I could spend the rest of the show talking about it. He's rich, but nobody respects him. Nobody thinks highly of him anymore. And he looks like a freaking loser who actually doesn't know what he wants or what he's talking about. That's Myles Garrett.
It's funny because I feel like these premier pass rushers, and we do look at the guys like the guys I would put in that top tier who are going to earn that big money. Max Crosby, Myles Garrett. I think Nick Bosa, despite a down year last year, I think we still put him into that conversation. TJ Watt, Micah Parsons.
Chris Jones.
I mean, Chris Jones is the only one who reasonably is on a winner, and that's because he came into that situation not on a big contract and eventually earned that big contract. But even so...
And as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid, all
those other guys, paying for a pass rusher in a way that you pay a quarterback, and they are getting into that kind of terms of money. You would argue that from a draft perspective, it's the most difficult position to find other than quarterback. From a free agency perspective, it's the most difficult position to find other than quarterback. But actually now, I feel like teams are almost dodging a bullet by not bringing in a Myles Garrett for 2 first-round picks. Because take 2 flyers on... You're not going to get Abdul Carter in this draft, but you might get a mid-round pass rusher if you're picking in the middle of the first, and you might have traded for Myles Garrett. And then if one of those 2 lands, you've got them on a cheap deal for 4 years. Like, it's almost become like a quarterback level. You want your pass rushers on a cheap deal and then rotate through them.
Well, this is the smartest thing you've ever said. I literally, before we did this show, or obviously recording live, I spent half of my day working on updating the story at talkSPORT.com. This is the headline: ranking the highest paid players in the NFL who aren't quarterbacks, from Myles Garrett and DK Metcalf to Justin Jefferson. One of the most fascinating things when I was putting all this research together and ranking it, and it's based off total contract value, half of the guys aren't that good. Now the quarterbacks, that's a whole nother thing, because somebody's choosing to pay Trevor Lawrence a ton of money, but you have to have your franchise quarterback. We all accept that. But once you start investing major money into a non-quarterback, you look at the guys who have that money, half of them, you start going down the list, really bad contracts. The New York Giants have 2 of the top 10 contracts in the NFL that are not quarterbacks. What are the New York Giants doing right now? They don't have a quarterback. They weren't smart enough to bring back Saquon Barkley. They're paying the wrong guys. You look at the Browns. This is what I also don't understand. A lot of it's on Myles Garrett. A lot of it's on the Browns. Will, they don't want to lose him because he is really good, but you're choosing to give him that much money, and you don't have a quarterback. You're not going to win. It's horrible roster construction. And that's one of the biggest things. You look at the Eagles, you look at the Chiefs, you look at the best teams. It is how you allocate your salary cap and how you figure all that out. That's one of the greatest arts right now in pro sports. That's why you have to have the front office right, the head coach right, the quarterback right. But the fact that the Browns did this, Myles Garrett did this, biggest losers to me in free agency, and I just don't like anything about it.
We're not going to talk 49ers now, because I'll get into that in a little bit with all their losses. But part of what I think is a prime example of what they've done wrong over the last few years, outside of the Trey Lance trade, is not getting their deals done early, which led to...
Which we see a lot with the Cowboys, right? That's a huge issue for the Dallas Cowboys.
A massive issue for the Dallas. Like, this, you now got to a point where you could have paid Micah Parsons last year and paid him $31 million a year. Now you've got to pay him at least 40 to match Myles Garrett because you waited another year. Going back to, I mean, I keep talking about DK Metcalf, but when DK Metcalf signed his extension in 2022, it was $72 million over 3 years. And people looked at that and went, that looks like about the right level for a T. Higgins. Yeah. Like, you know that Chase and Jefferson are going to get close to 30 million, but T. Higgins, 72 over 3 with 45, 50 guaranteed. That looks good for him. Nearly 3 years later, DK Metcalf's now got a 4-year, $132 million deal. And T. Higgins still hasn't been signed yet. Teams who take themselves seriously, who do their business in the right way, get their business done early, get their guys at the cheapest point. If they know they're going to keep them long term, sign them a year earlier than you need to, keep them around, and yes, you have to pay them more that year, but the long term, it's going to save you a ton of money. And you look at what the Eagles done this offseason already. Outside of the moves that they've made, the guys that they are keeping around, whether it's Zach Bourne, who they had to sign because he was a free agent, but whether it's Saquon Barkley, they're getting these deals done now rather than waiting till down the line. They did it with Jordan Mailata. They were trying to sign Jordan Mailata now when his deal was done. He'd be costing them $35 million a year. Instead, they're paying him closer to 20. Like, good teams get business done early, and bad teams like the Bengals, like the Cowboys, just absolutely do not get their business done early, and they get left in a situation like the Browns are now, where they got held over a barrel and they were either like, right, we've got Andrew Barry, I have to be the guy who traded 3 first-round picks and gave the biggest guaranteed contract of all time to a guy who has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL and is basically, as we understand, almost as bad of a human being. And now I'm going to be the guy that trades away Myles Garrett. No way, let's throw money at him. And the Haslams have let him get away with it. It's madness. Absolute madness.
By far the smartest thing to do would have been to trade Myles Garrett and to what? Okay, so put on your GM hat. What do you get for Myles Garrett at the end? Can you hold him to the draft? Right? I mean, that's so simple. This is like football 101. You trade Myles Garrett draft day at like 10 a.m. in New York, and what do you get for him? Probably a couple first, a first and a third. You're at least getting a first round pick for Myles. Probably a couple firsts.
I think you get 2 first. They want one of those firsts to be in the top 15, 16
but the market is the market,
which
right?
Kills their market a little bit. The problem is, whoever you trade Myles Garrett to, even if they've got a top 10 pick this year, the likelihood is their next pick is going to be nearer 20 to 25 because there might be a playoff team next year. But you have to accept that risk, though.
But you've already lost, because the problem with one of the billion problems with the Myles Garrett deal, you screwed up Deshaun Watson so bad, right? You were a loser. You get Myles Garrett. He's really good. You have a defense. You have some momentum. And then you decide as an organization, the best thing that we can do to move all this forward is to sign a quarterback that nobody wants to touch. You know, there was a bidding war. Deshaun Watson, biggest free agent, biggest trade failure in NFL history. Everyone in the world knows that. So you screwed up so bad that basically Myles Garrett wants out. But to save face, you have to keep Myles Garrett, and then you thus have to overpay him, but you don't have the talent to win. At that point, you have to suck it up. You have to eat it, and you have to trade him. And at least you can start a rebuild. You can move it forward. Again, the Browns aren't going anywhere. They're not going to be better than the Ravens. They're not going to be better probably than the Steelers. That's a tough division. You don't have a quarterback. So, you know, maybe in the draft, you get your quarterback there, but you're not winning week 1 with that guy. It's going to take time. And Myles Garrett, he wants to win right now. None of it makes sense, Will.
Right, let's as part of that, there's the Josh Allen deal as well, which I think is a similar thing. Signing a guy early, getting that deal done, smart move from the Bills' perspective. You know, they've made some other moves so far. Josh Palmer to try and they each year they look for this deep threat who's going to cost them less than kind of $10 to $15 million. Palmer is the latest of those. Might work out, might not. He's not going to be that number 1 guy they want, though. They've got this weird like 1A in Khalil Shakir, who's going to catch 80 targets and get you near 1,000 yards, but they're all going to be short yardage and yards after catch. But so I'm not sure whether he's in the position to succeed this year or not. we have had a bit of breaking quarterback news. Daniel Jones.
Oh, did he decide?
Is finalising a 1-year, $14 million deal. Well done, Danny Dimes. To sign with the Indianapolis Colts.
Oh, and so then you'll have a quarterback competition with Anthony Richardson.
That's the plan.
So, I mean, that's just so funny to me. Again, it's the NFL's so funny to me. The Colts drafting Anthony Richardson way ahead of when anyone thought he should have gone. Jim Irsay was infatuated by him. He's been a total letdown. And now you announce early on, before you have the quarterback, that you're going to have a quarterback competition. That makes no sense to me at all. That's very, very poor, coach speak, right? At least know who your quarterback is before you announce a competition. And then your competition is Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones could very well be starting. Like, Daniel Jones might be better than Anthony Richardson. He's probably going to be more predictable, stick to the script more, run the offense better. Anthony Richardson has an incredible talent, but we're not playing a video game. This is the NFL. You have to do it play after play, week after week, month after month. So Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson to be the Colts starting quarterback. That sounds like they're not doing anything next year. Yeah, I like the moves they've made on the back end of the defense. Bringing Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward are not bad moves at all. Like, the secondary was an issue, but they lost Bingo, who I think is a good pass rusher. They lost Ryan Kelly. They've now lost Will Freese to the Vikings as well. So, they've got a quarterback controversy, but it's going to be or a competition, but it's behind an offensive line that's a little bit all over the shop. So I'm not sure about that for the Colts, but it's well under the cap for them, and that's probably the only thing. The key is it means that JJ McCarthy is now the Loans Viking quarterback under contract. And listen, I'll start here. Let's get into our winners and losers. And I didn't think this was going to be the first winner out of my mouth, but I want to talk about the Minnesota Vikings because, yes, they've gone all in and JJ McCarthy's the guy, and they'll probably go and sign a veteran bridge guy. Jameis Winston's still out on the market. I know the 49ers have been sniffing around him, but somebody like that who can come in, who can be a bit of a leader, who can be someone who can work with him. What I do like is that they've gone... I think teams who go too big on the first day of free agency, unless you're the Patriots... It rarely works.
And you had $130 million of cap space, it's not the day to go hard and win. Somebody, when they put that out there, pointed out that the Eagles signed Zach Bourne on day 1 or day 2 of free agency. I'm like, that is a move that they got very fortunate with, or got the conversion worked 10 times better than anyone
I think the term is anomaly. That is
anomaly
the anomaly
is the right
to the
word
norm.
For it,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah, it's the difference that proves the rule, right? But what they've done is they've gone and got Ryan Kelly, 2 years, $18 million, cheap for a centre, but very experienced.
Solid, yeah.
Will Freese, who I think is one of the best guards in the NFL. They've paid him big money, 5 years, $88 million, but that's a similar contract to, what other very mid-tier guards have got in this. I'm thinking the Aaron Banks move, for example. He's getting $77 million for 4 years. I'd say Will Freese is a much better guard than Aaron Banks, having watched both recently. And confirmed today, they're signing, in addition to Jonathan Allen coming in, they're signing Javon Hargrave once he's released by the 49ers as well. Risky off the back of an injury, but they've gone, we had an issue last year. Our issue was in the trenches. We need to get bigger. We need to be able to stop the run. We're a playoff team who have a problem. Let's go and address it with the money we've got. I don't have a problem with that. I think the Vikings have done good business over the last 48 hours or so.
Yeah. It's good for them. What is JJ McCarthy going to be like? That is the thing, and no one's going to be able to answer that. I cannot wait until August when there's the JJ McCarthy training camp stories and he looks so amazing, or he's had a bad day, or whatever it's going to be. It's going to be so all over the place. That's how it's going to go. That will define their season. Very good defense. I totally agree with you. They made nice moves. I like that they moved on from Sam Darnold. We had talked about this a few weeks before. Yes, having him leading into McCarthy, that sounds awesome. Contractually, that made no sense. Sam Darnold was going to get $35-ish million.
Well, the answer we did get was how badly did those last 2 performances cost Sam Darnold? Yeah, and I'd say it's about $10 million a year because he was due to get mid-40s.
And Kevin O'Connell, he's there. He's in the middle. He's actually in the arena. He's in the room. He knows what he has in Sam Darnold, and he knows, reading between the lines, that Sam Darnold was good, but not good enough. And so he's going to bet on JJ McCarthy, believe that he can get the best out of him. JJ McCarthy has to back that up. And it's a very interesting situation. You have that good of a defense. You got a great fan base. You were good last year. one of the surprise teams in the NFL, and you've got a national championship winner, a top 10 quarterback drafted, a guy who rose up the draft board, who's has leadership, and he just had really bad luck. Like, sometimes that happens. He had a weird injury at a weird time, never played a snap really. Don't know anything about the guy right now. We have no idea. That's a lot to put on his shoulders. I'm sure they'll bring in another veteran and fill up the quarterback room. Someone like, not saying it'll happen, but like a Joe Flacco type makes sense in that situation. I like that they moved on from Darnold. If for me, I always believe if you believe in your quarterback, you have to support them, and having some fake competition, because I've covered those before, it doesn't make any sense. If you believe that J.J. McCarthy is good enough to start for you next year and you can win with him, give the ball to J.J. McCarthy.
Winner or loser? Which way are you going? You've gone pretty hard on a loser after Myles Garrett.
Well, I have no losers left. There's only Myles Garrett. I'm going to go with a winner, and let's have this fun debate. Okay,
I'll tell you the other loser. Because we've buried them already. The Cincinnati Bengals. Because if they want to keep Hendrickson and Chase and T. Higgins, it's going to cost them about $120 million for the three of them per year because they've waited so long. Idiots. Right, carry on.
I'm not sure if it's going to work out, and I guess this is a pretty simple pick. I do like that the Washington Commanders are being aggressive. Now, I know we were on here last week, and you didn't like the initial moves, and I fully understand that. I do like that they are doing the smart, simple, classic thing where they are saying, this has become the trend, and it is a trend for a reason, because it's so much about your salary cap and roster management in the NFL, and this is why free agency and the draft are so important, why all of the blogs and the podcasts get so into them. It is the inside football from a media standpoint. The Washington Commanders are basically saying, we have Jaden Daniels. He is ahead of schedule. He was better than we ever imagined. He was the C.J. Stroud of last year, and we don't want to go backward. We want to go forward. We've got a good head coach. We have talent, but we need to get better. And we just watched the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl with a really, really good team, and they are going nowhere unless they party too hard in the offseason. And I don't think Saquon Barkley is going to let that happen. So what do? They go out and they bolster their offensive line. You might not love who they got, but they bolstered their offensive line. They add Deebo Samuel. They gave Jaden Daniels, who is their most important piece, they gave him more offensive weapons and they gave him more support. And that is exactly what you should be doing. Even if I say, hey, you know what? I watched too much Laramie Tunsil, and Laramie Tunsil is a false start machine. Like, there is nobody better. Winner, Laramie Tunsil is the greatest false start artist I've ever seen in my life. Texans fans have been watching this for years, so get ready for that, Washington fans. Like, you might not like this guy as much in week 1 and week 5 when he's getting all these false starts, but he is good. He's one of the best left tackles in the business overall. Teamwork, full buy-in can be an issue with that guy at times, but he's very good. I like overall what Washington did, that they were smart enough. They're being aggressive. They're not settling, and I respect any team out there that says, you know what, we were good last year, but we played an Eagles team that was better, and the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and so we're trying to be better. They're the opposite of someone like the Dallas Cowboys or any of these other teams that are always in that middle ground. I respect that Washington, and they're a winner for me right now in free agency, Will. I respect that they're trying to keep going for it while you still have your quarterback on a rookie deal.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. On the point of Laramie Tunsil, so the Texans trade him away. They get a second, third, and fourth back, and I think trade a pick swap in the fourth.
A pick swap
like
deal,
that.
yeah.
Elsewhere, they trade for Christian Kirk from Jacksonville.
Yep.
Braxton Berrios comes in. Justin Watson, who I guess is going to be the deep threat replacement for Robert Woods. And there's a couple of moves on the defense. Sheldon Rankins as the kind of, I guess, de facto Mario Edwards guy, right? If Edwards is going. The offensive line is the big question mark, though, right?
A huge question mark. And you can't fix all that. Like, you can't start 5 rookies, right? Like, you can't fix all that in the draft, and the best offensive linemen are already off the board in free agency.
They lose. Laramie Tunsil goes. Kenyon Green's going to go in this trade, who they took in the first round, just 3 years ago. So Nick Caley is coming in. He's got this fantastic young quarterback to work with. They clearly have weapons around him. You have seen quarterbacks in Houston ruined by bad offensive lines in the past.
I've covered them.
Yeah. How is this team making the same mistake yet again?
I applaud the creativity, and they clearly have a vision. I will say, and I've learned this through experience, and I said this earlier on the show, it is a two-part process. It is the draft and it is free agency, and the well-run teams, it goes together. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles last year. After free agency, you wouldn't have sat around and been like, oh my God, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. But once it came together with the draft and you put all that together, and they've done that for the last couple of years, that is how the Philadelphia Eagles remade their team and created the best team in the NFL last season. But I can say all that, so if the Texans make all these moves and then draft an offensive lineman and you start to build through that, okay, that makes sense. I fully agree with you. CJ Stroud had issues last year. He was not the same. Pass protection was a problem all year. You can have it all right. You can improve your defense. You can have a fantastic head coach in D'Amico Ryans. You can have a quarterback in year 3 who should get back to his rookie year, a new offensive coordinator. A lot of it none of that matters if you don't have the right offensive line. I mean, we saw that again with the Eagles, with the Chiefs. The proof is always there. Look at that Super Bowl. The Eagles had the offensive line. They had the defensive line. They had the running back. They had the defensive coordinator. They had all the pieces. The Chiefs couldn't hang with him. So I do question right now exactly what the Texans are doing. But I will say Nick Caserio has made a lot of moves. I mean, he's been very busy the last couple years. They're not done. The draft will be a part of that. And let's not forget this, you can always trade for the draft. Laramie Tunsil, they got Laramie Tunsil via trade. So they can find another version of that, and it doesn't have to be done in the first 2 days of free agency.
Yeah, and my kind of issue in terms of what we've seen in terms of the pieces that have moved in free agency and trade so far, and it kind of brings me on to my next winner, really, because as much as we've seen some offensive linemen, it's not a great offensive free agency class, and it's not a good tackle class, particularly in the draft. The interior looks a bit better, but too many short-armed guys if you want to get into the specifics. But I really like what Chicago have done over the last week. I mentioned this earlier.
They're trying to get it done. I respect that, yeah.
Yeah, they bring in Drew Dorman, who was very much the centre bell of the ball, and it's a rich contract, but it's a contract they can afford because they've got a rookie quarterback. So maybe they've overpaid Dorman a little bit, but he definitely improves that position. They then go and get experienced guys. Joe Tooney, one of the best left guards in the NFL. Okay, he might only be in the league another 2 years, but he shores you up for those 2 years. Jonah Jackson, a Pro Bowler with the Rams, who maybe didn't have his best season last season, but is still a consistent guy. And suddenly you go from one of your biggest weaknesses on the team with these 2 young tackles on the outside to being potentially like one of your, if not strengths, at least not something you're going to have to worry about week in, week out. And you're giving Caleb Williams the very best chance to win.
Yeah.
I think when I look at the Texans as part of that is I go, the reason I don't see the value in losing your guys is that the guys that are out there, outside of Drew Dorman, I can't find an offensive line move that I've really liked so far. Morgan Moses to the Patriots, maybe. That was an okay contract, but again, they've got a huge amount of cap space. But I use the example of the guys who have gone from the 49ers, but Jalen Moore to the Chiefs for starter left tackle money. Maybe not high end, but $15 million a year for a guy that he started 7 games in 4 years and didn't look particularly good when he did start them. Aaron Banks, who was an average guard, getting nearly $20 million a year. That's crazy money for these guys. And I think when it's a weak class, sometimes just staying pat with what you've got and building on it makes more sense to me. But maybe they take those picks and they package them up, they move up and they go.
Yeah, I mean, but it's obvious. What is obvious? There's 2 things. Number one, the Texans did not want Laramie Tunsil on their team anymore. They were done with him, and he's had issues from day one. It was a crazy trade that brought him there. I don't even have time to get back to go back to that. I covered that stuff live in Houston. And number two, they didn't want to pay him, right? I mean, you're going to have Will Anderson. You're gonna have extensions that you have to take care of. People that you value more, that are younger, that have more long-term upside. It's risky though. I mean, you just gave away. There's no way around it. Throw away the false starts. You just gave away your best offensive lineman, and your team is based around, as always, your team is based around your quarterback, around CJ Stroud. So then it's on them. It's on them to fix that. But It's not let's say this too. It is not overall a great free agent class to begin with. So nobody is going to make or break anything truly right now off of this free agency. It will be a combination of the draft, of free agency, of trades, and I think that's another big part of it.
How do you feel about the Patriots, right? I mentioned it earlier, $130 million in cap space this year. But they have done their damnedest to spend as much of it as possible.
They did what Jerry Mayer said they were going to do last year. And spend a bunch of money. They did it when they actually got rid of him.
So the splashiest move, clearly, defensive tackle Milton Williams, who's been one of the highlights of the playoffs this past year and arguably the Eagles' best defensive lineman in the Super Bowl. He gets 4 years, $104 million as his overall amount. They bring in Carlton Davis, who apparently the Lions pushed very hard to keep him around, but ended up giving him $20 million a year over 3 years, with $34.5 million guaranteed. Harold Landry seems like a weird one to me, but that's clearly Vrabel bringing in a guy that he knows, and he knows his pass rush has no juice. It just felt like a lot of money to give him $26 million guaranteed. Robert Spillane comes in, again, a position of weakness for them. Morgan Moses, 3 years, $24 million. That's not a lot to pay a starting right tackle, who wasn't bad for the Jets either. So, again, similar to what I said earlier, they went, right, Vrabel's in, we got to get physical. It's going to cost us a load of money, but let's get physical.
Yeah, my main thought is it is really hard, and history proves this out, to build your team through free agency to the point that it is impossible or never works. I mean, it rarely ever works. You love Drake May. I mean, you're wearing Drake May gear. You're buying the jersey, the North Carolina throwback. Drake May was good last year. Drake May, especially considering that his head coach got fired, that there were a ton of pieces and he hadn't that much talent around him. Drake May was, showed potential last year. Everyone knows that Mike Vrabel can coach.
They drafted a possession receiver in the first round who can't catch balls.
Yeah. Everyone knows that Mike Vrabel can coach. He's back in New England. I just feel like New England, that is a 2 to 3 year type of thing, and you're not going to fix it in free agency. So they haven't gone backward. They've only gone forward. They've got to draft well, but I don't think New England's turning this thing around. Bill Belichick sort of trashed the place before he was out. Bill Belichick did not get his deposit back from Gillette Stadium. I mean, they're like, man, you broke your lease, and
I think what I like is that Milton Williams goes there and joins a line which already has Christian Barmore on. If he comes back and he's healthy, great. And Keon White showed real flashes last year in his second year in the league. They were poor at the linebacker level, and they've gone and tried to fix that with Harold Landry and Robert Spillane. I really liked Spillane in Vegas, but then Carlton Davis to pair with Christian Gonzalez, that feels like a potentially, with good coaching, top 10 type defense from a talent perspective. It's one of those that's going to sneak into being one of the surprise best defenses in the league this year. I think it's just what has maybe caught people unawares is their one big add on the offensive side of the ball is Matt Collins.
Yeah.
Matt Collins is a wonderful teammate, a brilliant special teams guy, and he had a bit of a breakout year as a receiver in year 7 in the league last year with the Bills. But he's not a guy you're bringing in to be a number one target for Drake May. So a lot of work still needs to be done on that side of the ball for the Patriots. I like the moves as day one moves, though. I think like you say, they did what they said they were going to do last year.
They're definitely one of the busiest teams in free agency, which we did not associate with them last year. I think you're 100% right. You're seeing that Mike Vrabel influence. They're trying to build that team. But yeah, it's also interesting. You can build that defense up, but ultimately you got to build that around Drake May.
Quick mention for Joe Shane, seemingly
has he been fired?
Perpetual loser, who has given Darius Slayton a contract of 3 years, $36 million, but refused to give a very similar contract to Saquon Barkley 12 months ago. So that's forever going to haunt you, Joe. Enjoy that.
I said this at the end. I just don't understand why the Giants just didn't clean house. I just don't understand anything about that.
I want to mention the Los Angeles Rams. I think as much as Seattle have got a lot weaker in terms of the NFC West, the Rams won that division last year. They bring Matt Stafford back, and for me, they've gone and addressed two of the most important positions for them. They've gone and signed the absolute, I think this is going to be the hipster pick of this offseason.
Then you definitely need to talk about it.
Poona Ford, 3 years, $30 million. With the Chargers last year, he was arguably the best run-stuffing D-tackle, like nose tackle, old school in the NFL last year. He doesn't even have to move cities. He doesn't even have to move stadiums. And last year, we looked at that line and went, oh, they're so exciting and young and fast. But, man, they're really small. And it showed up against the Eagles. Yeah. They got manhandled, and Saquon Barkley ran out. So they went, all right, let's go get the best guy available to deal with that. Fantastic. And then Davante Adams, right? There was a point midway through last season I was like, Davante Adams might have ruined a Hall of Fame career here. He might have absolutely fallen to pieces. Like, he might be washed. And then down the last 7 games of last season, 7 touchdowns. He had that one second half where he had like 175 yards in a half. He went over 100 yards 3 times in that. And you started to see a bit of a spark of the old Davante Adams
putting with
there.
Matthew Stafford, that's a smart move. Yeah.
And look, it makes me think of the OBJ move, the year that they went to Super Bowl. I think people forget how good Odell Beckham was his 1 year in LA because of the injury in the Super Bowl. But you essentially have now Puka Nacua in what was the Cooper Kupp role, and the whole offense runs through him. And you have a guy on the outside who can play as a proper X-receiver, who can hit those in-breaking routes, who loves playing in condensed formations just like McVay does. I really looked at Adams and went, I can't see the landing spot that works. And they went to the Rams and went, oh, that's the perfect landing spot
What has happened
for him.
Like, you'll know this better than me. What has happened to Cooper Kupp? How come he is just like untouchable now?
I don't think he's
Did the greatest receiving season in NFL history go to his head? I don't understand why it's just like, nope, we just don't want him at all anymore.
He was a Triple Crown guy in a way that, when Justin Jefferson was the Triple Crown, you go, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. When Cooper Kupp does it, you're like, what?
Are you saying because he's white and has a beard or something?
Because he's not going to be a guy who you necessarily throw the ball 50 yards downfield to.
He's not necessarily going to be a red zone guy.
He's not necessarily going to be your, that's nothing. Davante Adams solves some red zone issues for them as well. I think Cooper Kupp is a guy who, if they could bring him back on a cheaper deal and have him as a third receiver.
I don't think he's coming back there.
They might do it in a heartbeat.
They have literally kicked him out of SoFi Stadium.
He will be released. Nobody's come in to trade for him. And actually, there's a bunch of guys over 30 right now. Amari Cooper and
NFL's brutal.
Like, these guys who are just not going to get touched by so many people.
Brandon Cooks. Like, Brandon Cooks is out there basically saying, Cowboys didn't use me right, but I'll sign with anybody. And maybe someone picks him up. I mean, the NFL, once you hit 30...
yeah,
they basically have no use for you unless you were just really, really good or really affordable or some combination of that.
Yeah, receivers over the age of 30 definitely are one of the losers of this window. I really like what the Rams have done. And before we go, I should address the situation in San Francisco, because I've got a lot of tweets about this and a lot of people asking me about this and a lot of people, who are, I don't know if you've seen, there are a lot of talking heads out there. I saw particularly Chase Daniel going after what they were doing.
I don't know if I qualify him as a talking head.
I saw Emmanuel Acho going after him.
Definitely not somebody whose opinion that but yes, I know people are saying yes. I've heard it.
A lot of people kind of going hard after the 49ers, and maybe I'm talking out both sides of my mouth when we've just done a show about all the important moves of day one of free agency. This is very much clearly a process there, right? They went...
Wait, you're sounding like me now.
Yeah. They went all in on this team over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. They got to 2 Super Bowls. They lost both of them. They had a weird situation with the quarterback where they somehow managed to draft a guy at the tail end of the draft, despite the fact that they'd spent all the money to get the guy they thought was going to be that guy, right? They spent all the draft picks to go and get him. But there was always going to be this kind of coming to Jesus moment where they had to accept that things were going to change. And I've looked down the list, and there's a lot of people who are saying, oh my God, what a talent drain. What a huge... If I'm trying to be rational about this, I'm saying, yes, they would not want to have seen 10 starters from the Super Bowl 2 years ago have left the building in the same day. But realistically, they were never going to pay Aaron Banks what the Packers paid him. They were never going to pay Jalen Moore what the Chiefs paid him. Talanoa Hufanga and his injury history just was never going to get... it was originally announced as a 1-year deal by the insiders, and then suddenly it was a 3-year, $45 million deal.
Oh, wow.
I think when the real details of that deal come out, you're going to find it's a 1 year full of guarantees, and then it's going to be we'll see how it goes. And I love Talanoa Hufanga, but the injuries are there. Charvarius Ward wanted out because of his personal situation. You can't blame him. And the rest of it, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel we've talked about, I think was washed at this point, at least from a 49ers perspective. The ones that maybe sting a little bit, Kyle Juszczyk is such a brilliant locker room leader, but he basically played the second tight end role for the last 2 years, and last year wasn't very good there, and we actually really struggled in the run game there last year. Add on top of that, the Dre Greenlaw issue, right? Dre Greenlaw wanted out. He wanted to go somewhere where he could prove that I'm not just Fred Warner's second in command. I'm a guy who can do it on my own. They weren't willing to match the money that the Broncos matched. And so there's none of those deals where I'm banging my head against the wall and saying, oh my God, I can't believe they've lost that guy. They drafted brilliantly last year, and they've replaced, I'd say, 80% of that talent in last year's draft. Do they need a brilliant draft this year? Absolutely. Does the Purdy deal need to make sense from a team perspective? Absolutely. And do they still need to get much better on the defensive and offensive line? Absolutely. But nothing on that day of free agency is making me go, oh my God, the 49ers are now going to be a perpetual
that all makes
5
sense.
or 6 win
and it
team.
Sounds like you're a 49ers fan, Will.
I am.
They screwed up Brandon Ayuk. Like, the whole thing of Brandon Ayuk was weird, okay? And now you have reports coming out that there was, some front office dissension about that involving Kyle Shanahan.
That report, by the way, from Mike Silver is astonishing.
Was very seemingly very well reported. Yes.
Brandon Ayuk essentially came to him and said, actually, I think I want to stay, while John Lynch is on the phone to Pittsburgh finalizing a trade, and he sprints across the building to get him to slam the phone down.
And that contract thus far has not worked out.
No.
Who is your true number one wide receiver right now that is going to just dominate? Brock Purdy's good enough. Like, we agree on that. Brock Purdy is good enough. You have to find the right number, and that's always going to be complicated by the amazing fact you just pointed out. He was the last pick of the draft. So that's a difficult contract to figure it out. They will figure it out. That's a winnable division. That's a winnable division. They have a lot of talent. They're well coached. They're at a bit of a crossroads, though. I think you can admit that.
I want to be really clear here. I'm not defending the front office. The Ayuk contract was bad, and actually, if he'd been traded last year, I think people would have looked back at it 12 months on. They would have buried them at the time and looked back at it now and gone, actually, that probably was the right decision for the team, right? I still think now you've cleared that cap space, I still think Ayuk probably stays, and we can expect a much better season out of him this year. Clearly, they're going to change what the offense does. With Juszczyk leaving, with the tight end coming in from Jacksonville, like, that's a design to move things. But this is a front office who did the Trey Lance trade, who I think that one of the best moves in free agency, and one we haven't actually talked about on today's show, but is the move that sees DJ Reed go to the Detroit Lions as a replacement for Carlton Davis. DJ Reed was drafted by the 49ers, and in the second year of his contract, got injured, and they did the thing that so many front offices do, and they took the calculated risk of going, we're going to waive him to bring him back on practice squad and then put him on IR, so it's much cheaper on a cap. He still makes the same money, but it's cheaper for us on the cap, and it's better for us from a squad perspective. And the Seahawks went, nope, and claimed him off waivers, and it cost the 49ers massively because he's gone to the Jets and been brilliant, right? They have made huge mistakes over the last few years, and they've still managed to compete. They've still managed to go to multiple NFC Championship games. They've still managed to go to 2 Super Bowls. So that's why I have to look at it and say, let's trust the process a bit, because we buried them after Trey Lance. We buried them after several other things. And what will happen is off-season, they'll get Purdy done. They'll extend Kittle. They'll extend Warner. If they have a good draft, I think the 49ers compete, at least in the NFC West next year. And then when you're in the dance, they have a chance. I think that wraps it up, right?
You sound like a 49ers fan.
I am a 49ers fan, and I'm all right with that. Sometimes, one thing I love about talkSPORT is they let us wear our heart on our sleeves. We don't have to be neutral.
They're not having the worst. I mean, I'll give it to the Cleveland Browns or another team, but they're and then I will always go back to what is Christian McCaffrey going to give you next year? We can talk about all these things, but can Christian McCaffrey be Christian McCaffrey? If so, that covers up a lot of issues. If not, it's going to look even worse.
Right. Thank you so much for watching.
That was a fun one, Will.
Long.
I think you literally just listed like 8,000 names. I don't know how you keep track of all of the names.
What I need is to go get a drink of water and have a lie down before the tweets start going off again and we get more.
I need to have lunch.
News.
It's 3:30. I haven't had lunch. I'm eating peanuts. That's been my lunch.
We've got some really cool stuff coming to the channel over the course of this week. Plus, we're in talks with the teams about bringing on some of these free agents once they do move.
We had Matt Miller from ESPN, NFL Draft Scout, who was fantastic. fantastic, who broke into everything. And yeah, we're what, like 6 weeks away from the NFL draft. We're just getting ramped up here.
Absolutely love it. Brian, thank you to you. Thank you to everyone who watched. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're listening to it on the podcast version, give it a rating and review. Go out there and do that.
Where are you on Twitter, Will?
Find us.
Where are you on Twitter?
I'm at Will Gav. He's BT Smith UK.
And then read everything at talksport.com.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much. This has been The Rundown.